Well, I just love that takeoff counter. Salut, bună seara tuturor. Sorry, Nick, I'll just start in Romanian. Just for a few minutes, I'm sure you're already familiar. You already know a bit of Romanian, but I will start in Romanian just for a short intro, and then we'll get started soon and stick to English. Bună seara tuturor! Bine ați venit! Eu sunt Adina Crețu, sunt coordonatoarea platformei Startarium, gazda webinarului și în această seară. Webinarul din seara aceasta va fi în întregime în limba engleză. O să începem imediat cu invitatul din seara aceasta, Nicholas Morgan. Dacă ne urmăriți pe Facebook, e important să știți că suntem live acolo doar pentru 10-15 minute, apoi conversația pentru interactivitate și pentru a putea folosi materialele, suportul de curs va continua în engleză în Zoom. Va fi o sesiune interactivă și în seara aceasta. Dacă aveți întrebări, le puteți adresa și în română și o să le traduc eu către Nick. Și cam atât cred ca instrucțiuni tehnice. Cred că ne auziți și ne vedeți cu toții. Recapitulez un pic contextul, dar o să fac asta în engleză, sper că e ok și ne urmăriți. O scurtă recapitulare, dacă sunteți cu noi pentru prima oară, despre Startarium și contextul în care vă găzduim și în seara aceasta. Startarium este cea mai complexă platformă pentru antreprenori la început de drum. Am lansat-o în echipa Impact Hub și ING în 2016 și făceam astfel de webinarii și evenimente și offline și online de multă vreme, cu o frecvență lunară. În ultima lună am accentuat mult efortul nostru educațional pentru a vă veni în sprijin cu resurse de know-how și poate și un pic de sprijin emoțional, poate să vă ajute ca antreprenori în contextul acesta. Și am mărit ritmul, organizăm acum 2 webinarii pe săptămână, trecând puțin prin temele pe care le-am găzduit până acum și cele care urmează. Mi-am dat seama că practic tocmai găzduim și share-uim cu voi așa un mini MBA pentru antreprenori. Am avut până acum teme de marketing, vânzări, negociere în business, de design thinking. În seara aceasta vorbim despre inovație și business modeling, iar în calendarul webinarilor următoare o să vedeți teme. Săptămâna viitoare urmează teme despre strategie și product management aplicate pe startup-uri. Tot săptămâna viitoare, joi seară, despre leadership în contextul actual cu Civi Magor. Peste 2 săptămâni ne uităm pe teme de legislație pentru antreprenori și de recrutare și HR. Ne-am cam uitat la toate temele care ar putea fi de interes pentru antreprenori, ceea ce înainte făceam oricum în Startarium, dar am sporit mult ritmul. În seara aceasta, okay, this seems like a good moment to actually start and switch to English, since I'm going to be talking about you, Nicholas.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went a little bit with people through our curricula, actually, of the past month and the coming one, and we realized we organized a little bit of a entrepreneurial MBA for people to actually speed up their learning process during these times, but not only. And your topic for tonight is how to build viable business models during the crisis. I'm gonna pretend I don't know why we proposed this topic to you, to actually let you tell us how is this an actual current, a relevant topic for today's context, and maybe a little bit about yourself, apart from the part that you're a half Dutch, half Scottish innovator and entrepreneur now stranded in Bucharest, Romania.
Yes. Well, up to now I've had beautiful weather apart today, so that's okay. And so thank you for the introduction, and also thank you for the invite. It truly touches upon one of my core passions, which is unleashing innovation, power, and potential. I'll be happy to elaborate a bit more later. So I've been doing workshops with entrepreneurs for the last 5 years. Being an entrepreneur myself, having started and failed in many attempts and finally being a bit more successful now, we've built a framework of how to really structure your business from a very simple point of view to make sure you cover the basics and you have a clear fundament to actually scale. We have focused on high potential corporations and startups to really find what are the tricks to leverage in a specific environment. So it's mainly digital, mainly scalable. But we found that all our fundamental structures work for most startups. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And what I've done with my 4 co-founders back in the Netherlands, or actually scattered around a bit because of Corona, is we've looked at, given the current crisis, how do we actually make sure that it also fits the context of crisis and Corona, and if there's any adjustment to be made.
Okay, so what's in brief, the agenda of the day? Because as a reminder, guys, if you're following us on Facebook, we're not going to be there for the whole session. So please follow the login instructions that you can see in the post right now. So we're going to start. You can start your presentation, Nicholas, if you'd like to, just with a short teasing of what follows today, or maybe the whole agenda. If you already have questions, you can address them. And now I'm talking to you, the people attending. If you already have questions, you can use the Q&A section, and I'll pick them up either as we go, or maybe at the end of some chapters, or otherwise at the end of the whole presentation.
Gotcha. So I'll share my screen. Let's see if all this technological chatter has also allowed me to understand how to share my screen properly. I think this should work.
Yay, you did it.
Very good. So as you'll see on the left, we have a lot to go through, but don't be afraid. It's actually very understandable and digestible content. We've given this workshop for the last 5 years and updated continuously with over 1,000 startups. It's something that I've, of course, made a bit easier to digest when in a webinar, because it's a lot of information. The main focus is on how to structure your business from the start, and then also how to create the winning mindset opposed to the losing mindset. About 3-4 months ago, pardon me, it's Corona time, so it's 6 months ago already, we had a keynote on stage at Startarium event, where we also zoomed in on how startups win and how they lose, and what are the key definitions that we found in the startups that we've worked with. I'll zoom in a bit deeper on what are the key differentiators and what you can do in these times to actually be part of the winning team.
Okay, please do. We'll still be live on Facebook for, I think, for the part where we decide on what's there to win and what's there to lose, and then we'll all join on Zoom.
Perfect. So I'll just jump in, and please, if you need to interrupt, or if there's any good questions that pop up, please do. Otherwise, I'll just keep going, and I'll try to be as concise and direct as possible. First things first, as we mentioned before, who am I? I'm the founder of Innovation Nomad as well as Startup Focus. Together with my companions, we focused on how to leverage the knowledge of this beautiful, speedy startup world and all the potential it has, together with the large pockets and structure of corporates, and found how to combine the best of both worlds. And together we look at unleashing innovation potential, be it with a small company or with a large company. Very briefly, that's also why I'm in Bucharest, working with ING, focused on building a new innovation into the market that, unfortunately, if you would speak to me in 1 month and I would say this, hopefully everybody would know. It's called DealWise, and I'll be very happy to share a bit more about that later. It's an artificial intelligence platform, very exciting stuff, but not why we're here today. Who is this for? Just a brief introduction. It's for aspiring and young entrepreneurs, mainly. We truly believe that these fundamental values of business hold true for all, small and big. but they're a far better fundament for smaller companies because it makes things quite simplistic to approach. It doesn't have the all-encompassing detail that you would of course need when you grow to a large company. What will we mainly discuss?
Sorry, Nick. I think you're moving your slides, but on the screen we still see the cover slide.
Let's have a look. Thank you for jumping in.
Give it another shot. I don't know if you're sharing the PDF or...
You should be seeing, so otherwise I'll do my desktop, but for now I thought this could work.
Let's give it another shot, and if we, okay, just move back and forth just a little bit to see if they move.
This is my face.
No, it's a fixed shot, so we see the disclaimer slide. It's not moving, but you can use just stay in preview mode like this, and it's fine.
Let me try one thing, because I'll do my desktop. Maybe that will work. Then we have a nice full screen, because it's nice to be able to see everything as well. Okay. I'll give it one more shot here. Let me know if you see the next slide.
Yeah, it's working now. Yeah, great. Thank you.
And again?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, jumping back in, who's this for? First of all, it's for aspiring young entrepreneurs. Next, we'll focus on how to build an accountable business now and how to innovate now. And we'll touch upon key topics such as data, data usage, how to acquire new data or where to find it. And also best practices that we've seen with entrepreneurs around us. The beauty of working in this field for 5 years is mainly in Western Europe, but also in the States. We've been able to build up a network, and beautiful stories reach us that have inspired us to see how other entrepreneurs are treating this crisis, because I guess we're all in it together. Small disclaimer. Again, as I said before, we focus on high growth digital startups. If you're not part of that group, that doesn't matter if you're interested in fundamental business building. However, take it as a disclaimer, because not all that I will state holds true for all startups, of course. And of course, there's no magic unicorn tricks that just you can unfold and you'll be successful. We've tried to find them. They're not that easy findable. If you have any, please do share. Moving on. The starting point of all our discussions with startups. And those of you that have met me before, and those of you that have seen my pitches, they know that this is the true fundamental question I always start with. And it's for me very important, because this is also how I really approach the right startups. It's, are you a business or are you a hobby? Treating startups as a business completely changes the ballgame, because it means you're really going into depth on what that startup needs to structure properly before it can actually be investment worthy. And that's what's been our focus in the last 5 years. Why is accountability in this context actually important? We've seen that many startups focus on the sexy stuff, on the customer, on the product, on the money that might be at the end. But we've also seen in theory that to improve entrepreneurial outcomes and to hold entrepreneurs accountable, we need to focus on the boring stuff, how to measure progress, how to set up milestones, and how to prioritize work. Because we can't promise that we'll be successful, but we can show input and we can show traction purely based on effort rather than output. Eric Ries in the book, The Lean Startup Methodology, mentioned this better. So why are we here? Why are we on Zoom? Why are we discussing this topic now with each other through this webinar? It's because history has repeated itself and shown once again that exponential growth factors will always be part of our lives. As I mentioned during my pitch, Moore's law has been held true since 1965 in his analysis of the doubling of technological innovation every 18 to 24 months. What we see is that with this example that I gave, also in my pitch, we don't understand exponential growth just yet. First of all, if I would put a drop of water on the pitch of Yankee Stadium, and I promise my audience every minute I will double the amount of drops. My question is, how long will it take before the whole bottom floor of Yankee Stadium is full of water? Now, normally I would ask you the question, and please do drop a comment in. I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it. But how many minutes, hours, days, weeks will it take before the bottom row has wet feet?
Well, this seems like a perfect time for me to be cruel and actually stop the Facebook live transmission. So for those of you guys who are following us on Facebook, you still have a few seconds, minutes to join the webinar. We continue on Zoom for full stack interaction and sharing the slides and conversation with Nicholas tonight. So please, Nick, back to you, and we're starting the live transmission now.
Perfect cliffhanger, I like it. So the answer, and I haven't cheated, I haven't looked at the comments, but I saw something come in, is actually 45 minutes. So 45 minutes before that first drop, after doubling from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 and onwards, it takes 45 minutes to have enough drops to actually get the bottom row their feet soaked. Now, the next point is, of course, how long until everybody in the stadium is drowning? And the answer there is actually very short. Because it's exponential growth, and because you can see on my screen now, the water is filling up, doubling of that amount goes, of course, a lot quicker, as we know with logarithmic values. And I think a lot of people now are starting to comprehend that, because these scales that we see with Corona also show that you cannot show a linear path of exponential growth. You always have to look at the logarithmic path. So indeed, 5 minutes after that point, that's when everybody's drowning. And this is what happened with Bitcoin, with a lot of innovations. And we've looked at the innovations that have hit us by surprise and now are part of our everyday lives. And we're not even talking here about the TikToks of this world. And we're not even talking about Corona. Because all these things have gone so quickly. And because of this globalized economy, we're all part of this new wave of technology. What we now see is that Corona has been a huge impact. And the fact of the matter is we will always have to deal with exponential growth, be it in technology that you have to adapt to, be it in demographics that you have to adapt to. But I think we should all understand that, of course, we hope everything will go back to a form of normal, but there will always be change. And the quicker we are able to adapt to that change, regardless of which way it goes, the better we can try to put all the variables in place to be successful. Now, if we switch to startups, we know the well-known passion, panic, and perseverance. I'll briefly go into startups that fail and startups that are successful, and then I'll switch to why startups are successful and what we see as benchmark practices in this day and age with the current crisis. First of all, this is the stats that are still out there. 9 out of 10 startups fail. And that often happens after an exciting onboarding phase, an exciting initiation phase. However, they haven't found the traction, they haven't found the investor, they haven't found the funds to get them going. And they move into a panic phase where everything doesn't look to go as they want it to go. And unfortunately, many startups fail. And many startups go through that valley of death, as we call it, and don't come out of it. Now, very briefly, why do 9 out of 10 fail? We focused on basic discussions with our startups, the ones that failed, but also looked at a lot of research. And the 3 key fundamentals in this order were timing, team, and money. I won't go into depth, but we've seen that many companies had great ideas, but the timing of the proposition wasn't perfect. Just taking the given context now, if you would have, I actually know a coffee shop that just opened in Amsterdam through a friend of mine, and he just started before Corona. He got the funds together and he started. It's unfortunate because I'm absolutely sure he would be a success, but guess what? The timing is awful. And as a company, most likely it's going to be impossible to to stay afloat unless somehow everything goes back to normal very quickly. A team, getting the right people into your company, and of course money. Not being able to fund all the ideas that you have, or having to go too big and otherwise not be successful enough to remain too small, and thus not finding the right investors. This is with high growth potential startups. Often this is the challenge that they have, because the idea is there, the timing is there, the team's there, but the team might not have enough knowledge, or the timing might not have enough traction. Now, before I go into a more detail, the team, timing, and money equation, if you have any more questions about that and have any more insights about that, please do ask and share, either afterwards or in personal email. We as a company always try to enrich our knowledge base. So if you have new insights, inputs, ideas, or suggestions, please share, because we're looking into the various alternative options or alternative reasons as well.
I actually do have just two questions, variations on why the startups fail. The first one, I'm curious, just to make it very explicit, Nicholas, what's your definition of a startup? Because, you know, we're working with startups as well. And because last year's edition of Pitch Day, which you also attended and spoke at, was around the myth busting. Mm-hmm. In the last 4 years since we launched Startarium, we noticed there are a few myths around what is a startup. And by this, I mean, you know, not every new company that's launched out there is actually a startup. The state might look at this like that, the Registry of Commerce, banks, you know, the day it was founded, now that makes it a startup. But what's the definition, or how do you look at things? How would you define a startup?
It's a very good question. The unfortunate thing is I am a very gray thinker in a way. I don't think too black and white. And I think the ambiguous term that I'll give you is, for me, a startup is a highly scalable and ambitious group of people that have come together for a value proposition that has not proven itself. So to me, that is the fundamental starting point of a startup. A business, to me, is all companies that set up. For me, a startup, at least the definition that I've always worked with and that I've worked with in all the accelerators like Startup Bootcamp and Rockstart, has always been a highly scalable, ambitious, I always forget that word, highly scalable, ambitious group of people set out to build a value proposition that has not proven itself. Great.
I love that. I support it. +1. And then another question I have is sort of a follow-up question, is how do you define success? If you measure, you know, winning means if one startup out of 10 actually has success, do you associate that with actually raising funds, or is there any other breaking point in your research that you looked at?
It's, yes. So we've always defined success as traction, and traction can come in many forms. Traction can be at investors that are willing to invest in you, but the main form of traction that we look at is people that want your product. Businesses, or in the end, businesses are people, but people that want your product. And of course, for me, success and I'll dive into that a bit later, starts from usage. How many people want your product and are they willing to pay for it? That doesn't mean that if you don't have paying customers, you're not successful yet. Traction of Facebook was huge before they got any money. And then later on, of course, are you able to create a business model behind it? But the starting point is always traction.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like a very accountable approach towards success and startupping.
We'd like to think so, but again, the unfortunate thing there is that it doesn't mean that you're not successful. It doesn't mean that you can't be successful without huge traction. It just means that you need to define that metric that matters for you, and we'll dive into that a little later. if you're ready, how to win. So we had the 3 elements that made the 9 out of 10 fail, and there's always a element missing that we found. However, we then focused and zoomed in on the people that are still going and that are still successful. And through our discussions qualitatively with them, but also through quantitative surveys, we've tried to trim down on what is different from them to the ones that we saw fail. So this is, of course, slightly subjective, because a lot of it was discussions between us as founders on what did we see in these startups and founders that we didn't see in the other ones. But these are the key insights. First of all, mentality, then speed, and then focus, again, in this order. I'll take you through this one by one, and I'll give very specific examples of what that means in this day and age with Corona. Let me start with mentality. So we saw the difference between founders being gut feeling, following their gut, being quite emotionally involved, and very professional, very structured, sometimes also very emotionally detached, making them be able to make more rational decisions. Of course, there's always a balance to be made there. Then we have the personal approach versus the data-driven approach. Now, this is where you start from an idea, an inspiration, a passion, a purpose, and then you need to find your way through acquiring new knowledge and people that are smarter than you to follow the right track. And often we found that people thought they were Steve Jobs, but they could have better found more of a Bill Gates approach, as we call it, and really follow the data, follow the guidance of knowledge that is out there. Third point, tunnel vision versus validation. Continuously validate a vision that you have. If you have a vision that's perfect, but try to disprove it, try to validate the key assumptions that are in that vision and see if they still hold true. Again, this is a key difference between founders. Finally, autopilot versus strategy. It's very good. Most of the founders we spoke to had a plan, had a strategy, but some stuck to that no matter what, and some were able to pivot continuously based on new information. Again, this is very ambiguous because you never know exactly what to do, but I'll give some examples that show what the differences were and how you could adapt that as well. Just make sure, certainly a good event is as extreme as Corona to show you can stick to a strategy no matter what. So let me zoom in on these 4 specifically, starting with professional. So the starting point is a lot of discussions we've seen are discussions, and by the way, if there's any questions, I believe that these are being curated and they can be asked to me, so please jump in if there's questions that I need to answer now. I'm very happy to, otherwise I'll take them later. Professionalism starts with being able to focus on what matters to you and what you're able to influence. Now, a lot of discussions I've seen, also when I talk to founders, is the moment I pick up the phone to ask them how they're doing and what Corona is doing with their business, they have a vision on Corona, which is good. But if it's a vision based on knowledge, that's good. If it's a vision based on hypothetically trying to understand what the next steps are and what will happen in the future based on too little information, I always try to challenge them. How much do you know about this? Is it important enough to you, this macroeconomic influence? And are you able to influence it? If not, take the knowledge as given. Don't try to become an influencer on Corona, because everybody is. Focus on what you know and what you can influence, because it needs to be important enough to you. Now, a great book that helps in this is the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. It talks about how great companies are there and good companies. So why is Google great and Yahoo good? And this analogy, it's brought down to disciplined people, thought, and action, meaning that professional founders focus on getting their team to a professional, disciplined rhythm of work. They share a vision with them that is shared by the whole team, and they make sure the action is repetitive and consistent as well. Goals and guidelines. Being able to set a goal on the horizon in the future, and being able to set the guidelines for the team, is the ability to give the team the empowerment they need to actually move forward. When we look at data, we see that there's a lot of varieties of data sources out there. and it's always difficult to find what data should I follow, what should I not. We found that neutral facts from economists Bloomberg and McKinsey are the most durable, also in times of crisis. And we've also found that there's a way to approach this data. One is taking decision data first and insight data second. So please focus with your data and analytics on what decisions do I need to make in the short term to move forward. Then look at what data will give me a bit of insight into where we're going with this whole charade. The second point is, of course, you first have your data and trusted sources before you look at new data. But we also know that in these times, pretty much all the data that we have is becoming outdated because the world is changing very rapidly. Also for the company I'm working with now, as a consultant, we're looking at obtaining new data, be it a very simple survey that we just throw out there to get people to give us insights in what has changed in their behavior in the last 3 months. So find new data and insights and make sure that you utilize different tools to validate new data or obtain new data to get new insights. I'll give you that in the next sheet. What I would like to say is that I think this presentation has been shared with you, and please use everything that's in there. It's knowledge that we want to throw in the world, and that's how we improve it the most as well. You'll see a link in how to use data during a crisis, which is, in my eyes, a very good link that kind of encapsulates how to treat the topic of data in the current difficult situation. Validation. I'm talking a lot, so let me take a zip, but validation is, we like this a lot because it's a simple overview of all the types of tests that you can do, high level. There's always more detailed tests that you can do as well, but this kind of captures the most innovative data gathering tests that we've done. The easiest one, of course, in the left bottom corner is an interview. Well, guess what? We can't do interviews anymore, Corona. So we'll have to digitalize that process, but there's tools for that. The most extensive is, of course, to have a wireframe setup where you ask your user to click on a page and sign up for a service. And behind the scenes, you do the Wizard of Oz trick and actually give that service and make it look automated. All these different forms have different value for insights. But there's things that you can use, and I just popped a couple here, that we use now as well to make sure that we continuously talk to our customer, even though we can't talk to our customer. So look back is a way to measure their response to your app whilst they're using it and with specific guidance. I'm currently setting up a test with them, and it's quite a useful tool for us. A usability hub is one of my favorite ones, where you can continuously test a simple perception, but also end-to-end wireframes. And of course, pretty much my favorite, to be honest, it's just a Google form. Get questions out there, answered by as many as possible and as unbiased as possible. But by asking the right predetermined questions, you can make sure there's less bias in this equation. These tools are becoming most used tools in this virus, because all the startups that say they talk to their customers every week, they need these tools to still be able to do so. If they don't have the app completely running, or if the app completely running doesn't give them the data analytics that they need yet from, of course, their respective data partners.
Are you working, or are you aware of some interesting startups which are now validating ideas that just popped up during the crisis? Or most of them, were already working on it and are now trying to maybe revalidate what they assumed before the whole context changed?
Yeah, well, yes. Actually, I have a very interesting startup that I'll share with you at the end, which has been hugely inspirational for most startups, that has completely pivoted their business based on Corona. They were already reasonably successful, but then Corona kind of killed their business, and they validated a new idea and they went for it. I would like to save that until the end because then it's
yeah, please,
a
sure.
really nice
I don't wanna spoil your framework. We don't have questions yet. We have very nice comments around your presentation. So please.
Okay, this is I haven't read them, but that's great to hear. I will make sure to read them, to be honest. Maybe the one thing that I actually think is interesting, the company that I'm working with now, and I can share that that's not a problem. It's ING. We actually are launching something this month that it's very weird to launch something in crisis time. But because we see that it's hugely beneficial to the customer, and that's always been our goal, we've said it's not a perfect time to launch, but we see the value. So we're going to do this, and we have approval, of course. So this is an example that we had to completely re-strategize, see, okay, does it still make sense? Are we going in the right direction? Should we not pause everything? But validation with the market has shown that actually it's probably even a better time to launch what we're going to launch than before. Strategy is the next topic. So we had the four: professionalism, data-driven, validation, and strategy. Strategy, we always start with the impact canvas, and I just sketched as a gimmick here Corona on the impact canvas. Impact canvas is very simple. All your assumptions that you have that are key to your business, to your thought, to your idea, to your company, you list them and prioritize them based on how much you know about it and how big an impact it has on your company. And what we see with Corona, for example, is that it came in for everybody as a specific influence on their business idea or on their business. They couldn't establish what the impact would be. So there was low knowledge and high impact it turned out to be high impact. And we also see most companies are trying to see how they can get a bit more knowledge, but hope to see we go back to normal at a certain point. But we also see that most likely in the corner where we need to focus our priorities of assumptions and experiments is where there's a high impact and high knowledge, because that's where we need to get all the topics that are going to actually influence us in our assumption mapping on the impact canvas. So strategy, the most important thing here, and I'm pretty sure most people in startup world have worked with this, list your assumptions, align on the priorities with your team. What do we know? What do we not know? Anybody at the table have more knowledge, and then build a short-term plan on how to validate them. However, this should also be part of your larger scheme of plans, which I'll touch upon here. We call this a team strategy canvas. Together with ING back in 2017, we built this back in Amsterdam to help startups in the ecocenter there. Very simply put, this you can easily fill in. I gave you one example here, which is also in the document that you've received. I just simply put, what are the objectives and key results? So the objectives, high level as a qualitative phrase, and then the key results listed as measurable indicators for that for the next 3 months or the next month, depending on the time frame. I would now say the next month makes a lot of sense. And how good are you progressing towards those goals? So the score in the beginning is always 5 out of 10. It should be ambitious yet achievable. So 5 out of 10 should be the starting point, and then during the month you can update that score. As you can see, the rest is self-explanatory. It's a very simple one-page overview that you can also send to stakeholders and potential investors to keep them updated on your journey, and certainly if they're shareholders, to make sure that they understand where the team is going and how you're doing. We also have a more elaborate template that we help teams to be accountable towards their investors or potential investors too. This is key in times of crisis, to have that structure and to create that accountability towards the people involved in your company. I'll leave that there for now because there's always some questions about it, but happy to answer them one-on-one or through another format. The key of this starting point is how to win. First point is mentality, and mentality breaks down into 4 key fundamentals, being professionalism, data-driven, validation, strategic approach. Moving on, we look at speed. And speed, I can be very quick because speed now comes mainly in the form of experimentation. And it goes down to indeed learning. And I think we all have been challenged with this at this point in time, with Corona coming in, and with our experiments that held true having to be redone again because the world has changed so drastically, so rapidly. The Lean Startup methodology that we know is build, measure, learn. However, we've seen that the smart Lean Startup, certainly now we're Stama Casa, is learn, build, measure. So first learn, look what's out there, follow the trends, follow the channels, look at the macroeconomic impact of this crisis, but also at the microeconomic impact at your business level, at your idea level, what has changed in your sector. I saw this beautiful graph about the 660% increase in mouth caps, and of course the luggage bags, 93% decrease. It makes perfect sense, but these could be very specifically of influence to you. And by learning first and then building the experiments that you need to build to get that knowledge of the assumptions that you still have, then you focus on what you need to measure. This loop is the famous loop of innovation from the Lean Startup, and this still holds true. I think it's now 12 years after the original book came out, how to build scalable startups. Speed. The quicker you can do this, and the quicker you can get critical insights, but also consistent insights, is a differentiator between a startup that was more determined to be successful and startups that we sometimes even defined as hobbyists, because they had a great idea, but they weren't fully dedicated to find the truth behind their idea. A final point, and this is where I'll be a bit elaborate again, is focus. This is also why this part of our company, we always mentioned it, called it Startup Focus. This is also my email address. Because startups need to focus, but they need to understand where to focus. And there's so much to do on a daily basis that it's very difficult for them to focus. So we've built a bit of a pyramid of the fundamentals of a business. And I'll give you some specific insights in what you can do now to deal with the current changes. So first things first, talk to customers. Obviously, this is a starting point of every startup. You need to talk to your customers. I just gave you some tips and tricks on how you can still do that without breaking the bank, or with breaking a bit of money into it, because you need to be able to talk to your customers. Second point there is that next to all this information about customers and value proposition and being able to deliver that value, you also need to focus on the boring stuff. In the business model canvas that we all know, we have the channels, we have the relationship, the customer and the value proposition. That's beautiful. But then what about the internal assets? What do we all need? The resources and the partners, and what is the fundamental bottom line of our company? And this part is often not treated well. And this is what we're going to discuss now in terms of entrepreneurial accountability. Focus on the boring side of that business. So we have a pyramid, very simply put. This is that structure that you need to make sure you have a company that is investment worthy. Governance, stakeholder management, finance, innovation, accounting. I'll go through them all. The different fundamentals of this framework, the fundamentals of this framework differ per company. But that's why with this checklist, if you will, you can see where you stand and where you need to go. Let me start from governance. Governance is about the way you've set up, the founders agreements you have, the shareholders agreements that will come in handy very much now when you have tough times and resources are scattered. How do we as a team treat this crisis? The competencies that you have and the way of working that you have. What agreements do you have? What structure, what regimes do you continue on a daily basis? Do you have stand-ups? Do you work agile? All these mechanisms come back in the way of working. In stakeholder management, we focus on relationships, the monthly reports. So first of all, relationships, who is involved in my company, and define those relationships. We always challenge founders to state per person that is in your company what type of relationship it is. Be it employee, be it impact hub that's providing webinars with you, be it people that are involved in your family, be it potential shareholders, be it shareholders. There's a lot of different types of people that are often not mentioned, other than, of course, the end user, the customer. Make sure you're clear on who your stakeholders are. And then also, which of those would you love to send a monthly update? And this is something we've always advocated. Send an update to the people that you want to hold close to your company, without boring them to death. Make it a bit funny, but I guess we're talking to founders, so we know how to spice it up a little, but send them something so that they know what's going on and they understand in 12 months' time, they see in 12 reports what you've done, and you might be on the brink of success, but not there yet. They can see that because they've followed you on that journey. And finally, that's communication. Communication is key, both internal and external. A monthly report is a very good example, but the OKR setting and the way you work with your team is another example of how you can bring that structure of accountability into your company. And next topic is progress of innovation accounting. So the key fundamental difference between a startup and a normal business is that in a startup, often we see the money comes later and the traction comes first, but the focus on value comes first. Progress needs to be tracked. So you need to set up what are your key metrics, how have they progressed during time, and why do you have the key metrics that you're focused on, and what are the learnings, the qualitative learnings that you've also been able to gather from your customer. This is something we personally have always put into the monthly report because it's also what the investor that we had or future investors that were his friends were most interested in. What are the key metrics of your company? Is it awareness of your product? Is it simply put customer interviews that you've done to date? The amount of people that have signed up for something? What is the key metric? Without talking about money. And then how does that progress over time? Finally, we have finance. Finance is very simply put, cash in, cash out, and gap. So we have a business model. How do we think in the future we're going to make some money? We have some forecasting, and that's a beautiful, fun, engaging Excel exercise where you can build golden mountains. But in the end, it always comes down to cash flow. How much money do you have now? How much money are you burning? And when do you run out? That's also where we have a whole workshop for 2 days on how to build your financial model from scratch and to be able to always adjust it. But we won't go into that now. I will give tips for all these fundamentals in the current context. Just to pause for a second, any questions now?
No, there were one about the mindset, but I'll come back to those.
Okay.
I'll address them at the end as general question. But the engagement is high, no worry. I know doing online workshops, webinars versus physical workshops can be quite draining. Oh. But we have a feedback and engagement. No worries there. Just do your thing. And I'll think a lot of questions will pop up soon.
You guys don't see, but I'm talking to a wall, and yeah.
I know. I'm very empathetic. I know how it works.
I've done it before. It's just been a while, so I do apologize if I'm a bit rusty on this engagement. But yeah, I'm trying to get as much knowledge that could potentially help you out there, and I'm open to feedback. Normally, I listen a bit more, but I do apologize for this. But
just put on a unicorn filter or something just to make it more.
Well, I'll put something in the future, a unicorn or something. Okay, so back to the topic. We have a couple of slides, about 15 left. So we'll have some time for comments and discussion as well, I hope. Starting with governance. So as you said, set up competencies, way of working. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things here that might sound harsh or sound quite blunt. But that's the way we've seen the most successful founders work. And that's what we're trying to convey in our messages, that it really is about setting it up as an accountable business and making those tough decisions. One is also in the screen. The first one, of course, is saying set up, go digital, lower fixed cost. Once a crisis hits, the most adjustable startups look at what is exactly the core competencies I need and which people do I need to say goodbye to now. A very rigid example, unfortunately, is the recruitment business in Amsterdam that I have more elaborate network than in Bucharest, we saw that all the people that were hired the moment Corona hit, they were all fired. And people said, that's extreme, you know, you don't do that. The thing there is there's a balance between reputation and a business model and business sense. They have a bad reputation anyway. They don't care too much. So the moment they did that, everybody's like, yeah, they would be the first ones to go. It's a huge impact on the people themselves, but it's unfortunately also the risk you take in that environment because it's very bonus driven. And indeed, if the money's not there for the taking, the bosses are going to cut you. It's a very strong business decision though. Startups, I think, have a more empathetic way of working with their employees. So it's more about limiting the amount of costs that you really have to make, but not just firing people, because I think that's also where in this ecosystem, goodwill is one of the most precious things you have. Try and go at it together and not just go drastically into firing people, because that's not something that works in this field in the long run. But be the boss, make those tough decisions and look at what you need to do. In that sense, we've had this as well with the team I'm working in now, but also in the startup crisis that we had when we actually went bankrupt in the past. Create the short-term vision. If you see money's running out, if you see this is going to last or this is going to change the new normal, create that vision that's adjusting to the new normal, that is adjusting to the fact that you might go bankrupt. But the moment you've lowered your fixed cost, you focus on the bare essentials, and you've created a short-term vision, you will see that your productivity increases tenfold compared to all the ambiguity you had before. Because if you have a 1-month plan, you can crack at it. That's a big change in this time and age against hoping something will happen. Second point, about stakeholder management. This is where we need to keep it real. We have relationships, we have people, shareholders we call, the potential shareholders we call, the people we communicate on a monthly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, mentors. What we see now is a lot of startups we talk to, even a lot of startups I didn't talk to, but I also act as an investor. They called me just to see how I was going. And by the way, they needed some money. I've been in the position, I know how it feels when you're running out of money, you're going to try every avenue, but don't pretend you're calling me to see how I'm doing. Keep it real in the way that you establish who's important for your business. If you unfortunately haven't done that in the past, then do it now still. You start reporting to them, but be honest about it. Call them up and say, hey, I want you to know what I'm doing because we've had a great chat at this event. And if you're interested, I can share you a monthly update. If not, no worries, but this is where we're at. But do not start asking for money out of the blue, because it doesn't work that way. Again, entrepreneurial accountability is about being accountable and building that track record for investment worthiness. Third point is, of course, innovation accounting. Establishing your key metrics. Now, we all know the pirate metrics. If not, Google it. Awareness, activation, awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, or retention, revenue, referral, in whatever order. But it's all about getting people aware of your product all the way down to get people paying for it and telling their friends about it. Make sure you track the right metrics and you have a key metric for all. This can even be on customer interview basis. If you're talking to customers, you can also say, how many people have you talked to and are aware of it? And of those, how many have said, let me know about this when you launch? Not by saying, sign up here, but by asking them if they're interested, or by letting them tell you. That's even stronger. But this is simple metrics that you set up for your company. When you validate consistently what we discussed before, the main assumptions that you have and what you need to know to move forward as an idea, and certainly as a company, when you have an app in the market or a proposition in the market, then it's very strong if you can consistently mention what your one metric that matters is. So really drill down on this innovation accounting metrics, the non-financial metrics. What is that one metric that matters from the pirate funnel? Is it awareness? Is it now all about getting your message out? Because there's, I think 84% of all communication done right now is all about Corona. The other 16%, nobody hears about it. What is the message that is important for you? Is it awareness, or is it actually people that come back to your company and want more? Retention. So be clear about that and establish it together so that you can, in these times, also focus on what matters for your company. Final point, of course, finance, and we'll be publishing, I think on Medium later this week or next week, an article together with the financial analysts that I always work with, and we've built a lot of startup forecasting models. And we're just focused on the fundamentals for now. What can you do in these times when cash is king, but it's also very scarce? The 3 points we have. First of all, the business model, focus on your core strengths. And I'll give the example later on. A lot of people try to do completely different topics or jump on completely different bandwagons. If it's a very easy, straightforward topic, everybody's going to do it. There's not a lot of growth there unless you have core assets, core knowledge about that space that you can differentiate yourself with compared to anybody else that jumps in that space. But just focus on what are you good at and where can you make money out of knowledge from now, rather than creating new business models just based on current sentiment. Forecasting, always look to the next 3-6 months, certainly in crisis time. Certainly if you have no money, then you can even go further down to 1 to 3 months. But we always say, look at the next 3 to 6 months so that there's at least some longevity in your idea or in your business. And of course, the cash flow is minimal burn, maximum hustle. You have to face the brutal facts. If you're going bankrupt in a month, how can you make that 2 months? How can you make that 4 months? You need to be honest to yourself, because if you're a nice guy or a nice lady, you can have a company for a month and everybody's going to love you, but you're all going to be gone. How do you face the brutal facts and minimize the burn rate of your company? And of course, maximize hustle. I won't go into detail, but this is also the moment where you can come up with very creative ways of getting current investors more involved or potential investors involved with a huge discount for them to invest in your company. If you need any advice or any ideas, we've gone through many investment rounds with startups, so we'd love to help you. I say we, and my founders are quite busy, but I would love to help you. Yeah, there's no shortcuts there. It's just about really looking at all the options you have and trying to get mentorship from the right people. All this information is summarized very briefly on my website. Feel free to download it there in the 2-pager that you see here, or just email me. I think it's at the end. Then I'll be able to share it with you. I think Impact Hub also has this content available for you. Why do we think this is important? We see that the teams that plan and track this progress grow 30% faster due to their increased chances of investment, but also their increased chances, their increased productivity. And these two elements are fundamental for growth, certainly of a startup as we defined it before, high potential growth startup with minimal revenue at the beginning. Also, we see that now I have to state plus minus 70% because we don't know what's happened due to Corona. Of the businesses we worked with are still in business. After the summer and after this whole charade, we'll update this. But we've seen that the 9 out of 10 is not applicable to us. Certainly not because it's in a space where we work with also top-end startups to start with. So startups that we find through the accelerators. But these guys are still in business, and this still is a fundamental different percentage than the 9 out of 10 that normally fail, meaning that there's some truth in what they're doing. So quickly summarizing, and then I'm going to the end of this webinar. How to win. It's a combination of mentality, speed, and focus. I've given you some insights in how to approach these elements. I think mentality and focus have been quite detailed on what you can do. There's so many levels of detail that we don't manage to get into in a short time frame of 1 hour. But I hope these give you a bit of insight into the top end fundamentals of what can impact your company. But this truly is in the right format, the best way to increase your chances of success. And that is my main goal here. And I hope that does help. What I would like to share with you as well is this example of what I mentioned before. This is a company called Trilikes, actually very good friends of mine. We were in the Startup Bootcamp Accelerator 6 years ago, and they became successful with Trilikes, and I unfortunately went bankrupt with my team. On the left, you see that they press buttons if the toilet was clean. At airports, you see it at companies. However, they do a lot of offline retail, meaning the moment Corona hit, they had a mental breakdown, the founders, because they built a company for 5 years, and now all their business just went up in the air. But they sat together, they looked at what can we do for a pivot, and they pretty much said, you know, we don't know what Corona is going to do, but we know it's the only thing that's important now, and we know we're very good in sensors, hardware, and software combinations and technology. So they came up with this Aura Aware, and they've been, on the right, you see 3 articles of 3 different news outlets. They've been going viral all over the place in Holland, because all over the world, and they have had requests for their product, and they've actually set up this whole Aura Aware product and company within days, and sold out the first production of 10,000 immediately, and they're producing more now. For me, this is an awesome example of real founders, real technology. Don't look at all the other things you can do. Just start with what are you good at, and how can you pivot or take advantage even of the current situation. And this simple device shows you if you come too close. And all the desks, all the companies that deal with receptions, deal with waiting queues, deal with different formats where that social interaction is difficult to say to other people, hey, back off, man, you're too close. They've created a very simple device that you can easily install that just goes, gives you a beep when you're too close. A very simple solution, but a huge pivot, and obviously quite successful, not just in sales, but also in popularity. Final note, I'd love to end on a positive note here. I don't know if anybody knows who this email came from, but it says, Brian, I thought of a way to make a few bucks turning our place into designer's bed and breakfast. I guess I can stop there. This was 2007, just before the crisis in 2008, and indeed it's Airbnb. But what we saw is that these guys saw a small opportunity because they were struggling financially. And what happens is the moment everybody started to struggle financially, their idea made more sense and started to take off. And now everybody knows about them. They have different issues now, indeed, but they were able to find the right path out of this crisis in 2008. And I think we should take some inspiration from it. All right, final thought from me, and then I'll go to questions, hopefully. Learn from the past and the best. That's what we try to do. We don't reinvent the wheel. All the content you saw today is purely based on smarter people than me. I've tried to be able to absorb their knowledge and bring it in a concise manner to really spread the knowledge that they've shared with me. It's time to be bold. I like this phrase in general at any time, but certainly now I do believe that bold action can come with bold reward. So do not be afraid to do anything, but please don't do nothing. Sorry, that's a double negative. Please don't do nothing. Yes, that's, I think, the way I should say it. Do something. So make sure that you move forward, because if in these times you await everything, I think we all know, as we're in innovation, as we're in startup world, it's all about execution power. And even if it means that you need to sit still, do that on the basis of validation or knowledge. Don't do nothing. Don't sit whilst you're getting shaved, because that phrase only works if you know exactly what the shaving process will be. Make sure you do something. Either it's validation, talking to people, getting more knowledge, joining this webinar, so you're doing something, but make sure you keep moving. I think this comes to the final question. Why? Because, of course, and I'm going to always do this in all my presentations, it's a 5-year road journey that I'm on, so I'm having to do this again. You have to ask yourself that question: are you a business or a hobby? please make sure you know what you do, unleash your innovation potential, and hopefully you can get something out of this presentation. Thanks a lot. Mulțumesc.
Thank you, Nicolas. Mulțumesc. Right back at you. We do have some questions. I'll try just to connect them. Maybe to the last example you ended with, Airbnb 13 years ago, which was a lot about spotting opportunities. And some of the questions we got are around identifying opportunities and then making a decision, a safe, risk-averse one, or a more bold one. Maria is asking if, as many of us are pivoting these days, what direction do you see as having more potential? Go on a large existing market where people already spend, to identify an unmet need and address it, or to create new markets where people aren't spending yet, or they have unmet needs, which is the philosophical question on risk and reward.
I'll be absolutely honest. I have a very strong opinion on this, but that's not necessarily the right opinion. So take it at face value. These guys, and I put them up for a reason, they went into a space that was very clearly a need, but something that wasn't done yet a lot by a lot of other companies. People needed to help them with social distancing. I believe that if you found something that people don't know about yet, but the moment you test it as a prototype, again, approach it smartly. If you have a prototype, you test it and people are like, holy crap, I love this. They have something, and then be bold to follow that validation. Often, because you don't know exactly how much you're going to get back for it, you don't do it because you know it's a high investment. But guess what? If you truthfully know that you've done the right form of validation, you haven't biased the people that you've talked to, you haven't tried to sell them something, but really asked what they're looking for. And the moment you showed them your prototype, they had a wow moment. Be courageful enough to follow that. So to go back to your question, yes, if there's a new space with a new potential value proposition that through validation looks incredibly valuable to the users that you've spoken to, and there's a sizable amount of people that will be interested, absolutely.
Thank you. We have a question for Emilia. I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here because I know what you're going to answer, but let's just make it an educational experience for everybody. If for a startup, it's better to do something innovative or something already existing to have success. I would like also to add as a follow-up question for you, Nicolas, on this, maybe the distinction between, disruptive innovation and just incremental innovation, and maybe, wins and risks on either side of the strategy.
Yeah. My starting point in that respect is always what is your unique value proposition yourself? What do you have to bring to the table that others can't, or that others won't? And often in startups, if you look back at the difference between success and failure, some startups were just extremely good at executing. They just had a good gel within the team. 1 + 1 made 3. So those startups weren't necessarily building something completely new, but they found something and they were able to make it valuable very quickly. That is innovation. And if it's in my terms, it's a startup, a high potential startup when it's scalable and ambitious. And again, don't try to build a unicorn, but focus on what you're good at. If you find that you might be able to build a unicorn, but you have no idea how to, you can only prove yourself by finding the right people that can help you build that unicorn. If not, focus on what you can achieve, not what you can't achieve. I think that's a big lesson for me as well. I've always tried to be a very smart startup guy that has a high potential startup myself. And guess what? I'm a consultant now, and I'm purely focusing on what I'm good at, mainly talking to smarter people than me and trying to understand what made them successful and how that can benefit other people.
Did you notice, Nicholas, I'm curious, did you notice from your international experience any relevant cultural differences in this area, you know, specifically around risk-taking and maybe also towards approaching, you know, the distinction that you use between business or hobby?
Yes, absolutely. So Romania is the 8th country I now live in. I'm 31. So my cognitive life, I've been able to live in different countries. It's a very special country in itself. I fell in love with the country quite quickly, and that's why I'm still here.
Well, you're also stuck now, so.
I'll have to be honest, Corona is keeping me here. Yes, you're right. If I look at, I've done a lot of work in the Caribbean and the States, or with American startups versus European startups. I think that in itself is a huge difference. There, you really want to reach for the stars and settle for nothing less. And you have to promise mountains. The bigger the mountain you promise, the higher the chance of investment. Here in European standards, we have a completely different approach, and traction is key. I myself follow traction as well, because I think that is fundamentally what it's about. Do people want to use your product? Culturally, I think Romania is in a very good spot in terms of knowledge, but in a tougher spot when it comes to boldness maybe, and pushing ambitiously for being a large-scale startup. I like what UiPath is doing, but there's, in my opinion, based on what I've seen here in terms of human resources and incredibly talented people, I'm surprised that there are not more large startups. And by the conversations that I've had with the ecosystem, I think that is down to more of a mentality change here. That's needed compared to Western Europe, where of course a lot of startups have been able to create some form of unicorn success by going to the billion dollar valuation.
Well, I think a few questions are around some of our entrepreneurs in the audience today are asking for your feedback on their ideas, whether it's doing customized face masks or opening a coffee shop. You're welcome to answer any of those in specific if you'd like to, but what I know you're good at is just sharing some thoughts on the decision-making process, because accountability is a lot on actually having the founder making the decision if that's a good idea or not. So
exactly.
Any tips on that, or how to, the decision-making process basically, how can we help our audience today to realize on themselves if that's a good idea or not?
And I love that. I'm not going to change this slide either. I don't know if they can still see it, but this is actually the example of how to get a product to the market. These guys did it in 2 weeks. I remember that, the prototype. If you have an idea of a customized face mask, I actually saw, I think, unor done with it. I'm not following these guys for my work. But she had a customized face mask. Beautiful. She has a smart move. She makes it and she puts it in the market. A lot of people are interested. And because this is, you know, if it's a gimmick for now and we'll have it as a memory for the next 10 years, perfect. Then, you know, we have the normal again. If it works, people will continue to buy it. Again, if you validate first, you have an idea, you find a way to validate it, talk to people, set up a landing page, see if people can click on buying the product without it being available yet. Then you get an intent. If you see there's enough intent to like what you're doing, and people are very interested, take a next step. And if you need mentorship, go for that first, but then get the right steps towards how do we build a small prototype, what production facility can we engage with, and once you're there, how do we bring this to market? How do we market this? The steps sound extremely simple. There's of course a lot of complexity there, but go by it step by step. And then you will find the right answer to that question. In my opinion, the fact that Anna does this doesn't mean there's no market out there. It means she's smart enough to go for it. Hey, guess what? That's traction. If you follow traction and you have that same idea and you're able to execute fast, and there's still enough go for it. See if people want to buy your product.
Mm-hmm. Andre is asking if, again, feedback. If you consider that a software startup should start in a small market like Romania, in which it would have higher visibility, or try a larger Western market with higher purchasing power. Andre, maybe you can also share if it's a B2B or B2C startup, just to put the small market in perspective.
Yeah, the generic answer to that to start with is, of course, who's your customer? Is the customer in Western Europe better for you than in Eastern Europe, or is the Western European customer with a certain budget necessary for you to be successful compared to the Eastern European customer? And just as an example, what we're scaling now with ING, what's going to go to the Romanian market first, is actually something that started in Romania that we're also very proud at. Well, I say we Romanians, but I feel slightly Romanian now, that we're proud of that it started here, and we're going from here to other countries. And that's just because we first see what are the key, what do we need, what does our customer need to look like? If they need to earn $1 million and more, there's only very few people out there, so you probably have to go to the US immediately to find all the millionaires. But if it's a very generic target audience that you can specify a bit more, and you know your market here a lot better than somewhere else, then of course start here.
Thank you. Another question from Emilia is around shares and basically doing fundraising, getting funds, and then diluting your capital and giving some of the shares away. The rhetorical question there is if it's difficult or not. My follow-up question on this is how does that, does it collide with your advice on be the boss? And where do you draw the line on being the boss with new shareholders?
Okay,
Don't speak from your own experience. If you want, if you went bankrupt, maybe that didn't go.
Yeah, no, I love and I hate shareholders, but that's because they're the best people to have on board when it goes well, and obviously vice versa. The answer to that question is, so I always say it's better to have a smaller piece of a bigger pie. However, the good thing about shares is that there is a difference between share rights and voting rights. So you can have a larger part of the shares whilst you keep the voting rights centrally. I do think authority should be with the founding team. But right now, I think Elon Musk also only has 35 or 40% of his own company, and Mark Zuckerberg as well. So in the end, what happens is it does get diluted as you continue, and the bigger you grow. In the beginning, I think certainly for aspiring and for young entrepreneurs, we have a kind of a table of pre-seed, seed rounds, Series A, B, C, that you do not give away more than 10 to 15% of your equity in the beginning. And for certain stages, you just don't go above a certain percentage, because you need to keep that percentage as much as possible with the founding team, so that the decision-making team can be there. That is my opinion. But again, if you see a huge opportunity and you need to give away a chunk of your company to get the right money, but also the right wisdom on board, that's a risk you need to be willing to take, but it's not something uncommon, and more than enough companies have become successful despite not having control over their own company anymore.
Okay, thank you. We're almost out of time. We still have up to 10 minutes if you're still up to it, Nicola. So guys, if you still have questions, please use the Q&A section. Otherwise, I have one with a few comments and questions from our audience, which go back to some of the things you said. One is around mentality, and the other one around the distinction between business or hobby. I will start with the mentality one. You said you're a gray area kind of guy, and Sabine seems to be a gray area kind of guy also. I'm also in that, and I'm now referring to the distinction between, you know, when is it a good time to be passionate and personal? When is it a good time to make hardcore decisions based on figures? When to follow your gut instinct or not? You know, again, the mantra. There are things that are good, things that are bad. The important part is to be able to distinguish between them.
Yeah, I think so. It's a tough question. Being quite convinced that the majority of our decisions are always going to be in a very gray area, a non-contrastic area. What I see myself is that I've always tried to be soft on people, hard on content. So the financial decisions, the numbers don't lie. You need to be able to follow the data. If you need to make tough decisions there, don't be a dick about it. Pardon my French. Don't be rude about it. But be hard on content, soft on people. People understand. Investors understand. Mentors understand. The moment I had to quit my first startup, it felt like the world was ending. The moment I told them, my biggest investor said to me, "Oh, okay, what you gonna do next?" And I was like, "What? Why do you want to talk to me? I lost you a ton of money." And he said, "No, I saw this coming. It wasn't rocket science. You were gonna struggle anyway, but I like working with you. What you gonna do next?" And I was completely surprised. But again, you're honest about it, you're hard on content, and you're soft on people, and show compassion. That to me is the fundamental of key decision making. Going back to your question is when to make harsh decisions. Tough times ask for tough decisions. So if there's any excuse, there's an excuse now to take a big decision. Having said that, it's always based on the context of the question. In the end, if you, I only know that not making a decision is the wrong decision. So in the end, you have to make the decision based on as much knowledge as you can possibly obtain. But that's where I would stop my answer, because I don't want to influence you in doing something rigorous now that's based on absolutely nothing and purely a bit of passion and no knowledge or validation whatsoever. I've given you the steps, go through the steps, and if you still doubt it, ask people around you that know you best, and that's for me always been the best way forward.
Thank you. My comment on that is around figure-based decision making. Is what I always recommend to entrepreneurs is just to try to borrow a little bit of the corporate mindset, because you know corporates are now trying to mimic or borrow a lot of the entrepreneurial frameworks, and they copy a lot of things that they see in startups, but our startups should do the same. And one of the things I consider on top of the list to copy from corporations is use data and figures to help you make decisions. The reason they are there, all the procedures and systems to help track and measure are meant to minimize risk by letting people decide without knowing a lot. Of course, on the other side, you know, entrepreneurs should be able to make decisions without having all the data, because sometimes if you already have all the data, it might be a little bit too late. If all the data is already there, maybe you're not the only one who has it. Regarding speed, maybe that's also something to take into account. So the last question from Andrea.
Can I mention one more thing there? Is that okay?
Sorry?
Can I mention one small thing there?
Yeah, please.
If I look at the entrepreneurs that were successful, they took big decisions fast and with as much information as they could, but they set a time limit to that. Procrastination is the most convenient thing to do with big decisions, because you'd rather just push it away and maybe the answer will come. quick decisions based on as much information as possible for the big ones. And that makes you move forward fast. And as we know, you can, as long as you feel fast, feel cheap, and feel often, you learn most. A small minor note that I just wanted to add.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicolas, very much. I think Andrea's question is a great way to end, maybe to come back to the distinction you started with, and then which you also ended with, the very big distinction between business or hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I think Andrea missed the beginning and only saw the last part, and since I think a lot of the audience joined later, they missed the beginning. And why is this so important to you, the distinction between business or hobby? Because, you know, I don't know if it's only in Romania, but we also hear the recommendation, you should start a business by doing, you know, where this at the intersection between something that you like and that you're good at, mm-hmm. something that other people need and they are willing to pay for it. So where does it end? It should be something that you like, but do not treat it as a hobby.
Yeah, actually the answer is very simply put from own experiences. The founders, all of us, we were with the 4 of us and somebody added afterwards. So let's say the 5 of us, we started this topic of entrepreneurial accountability. We all experienced that we started a company either by ourselves or with co-founders from a passion about a topic and from enjoyment and a fun, positive space. And that is a vibe you always want to keep. The problem is that you need discipline, you need structure to be able to create a business. A startup cannot always be fun and games. So you need that accountability factor, that regime that also will trickle down to your employees to be able to scale and to become successful. Unfortunately, again, that is a gray area. That is a balance, because you never want to lose that fire, that passion, that why you started. But if you don't do the dirty work, or at least don't have the complementarity in your team to get that dirty work done properly, the boring side of business, as we've discussed, the chances of success slim drastically. And that's what we experience ourselves when, you know, I'm 31 now. 10 years ago, I was a lot more joyful and let's just do it, but a lot more naive as well. If I'd have the knowledge I have now with the ideas I had back then, perfect combination. But that's why there's always a balance. So try to not lose your spark, lose your passion, lose your joy, but make sure you complement that with the accountability factor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas, very much. I think this is maybe a good time to reflect on accountability. It's a good time for a lot of things. Thank you so much. We'll definitely be in touch. Hope you'll be stuck in Romania even after the travel restrictions are lifted. Thank you also for being so active in the local startup ecosystem. I know a lot of entrepreneurs are already working with you. If we have any follow-up questions, we'll make sure to pass them on.
Please do, please do. And thanks for having me. I really enjoy these sessions, and it always helps me. Plus, if there's any input or feedback, please do share.
Yeah. You just stay a little bit longer in the chat, and you'll be able to bathe in the positive feedback to make up for the lack of interaction. I know it's tough to speak just with your laptop in front of you. Thank you so much for doing it. Thank you guys for joining this week as well. Just a reminder of what's coming up next in Startarium's calendar of webinars. So we have 2 webinars a week. On Wednesday morning, we have a Q&A type of online consultancy sessions. The next one is on product management with Bogdan Koman. Then next Wednesday, we have one on sort of a training format similar with this one with Chibi Magor on leadership. we have another Ask Me Anything 2 weeks from now with on legal thinking for entrepreneurs. So this is gonna be nice. Then on recruitment and HR, and then just spoiler alert, yes, recruiting is still going on. Startups, still new people. It's actually a good moment for startups, as I heard, because the talent pool seems to be increasing these days. So it's a good moment for them to find new talents. So you can join. Everything will remain or will continue online on Zoom, and it will remain free. It was on Zoom even before the COVID. We were sort of disruptors there anyway. I think now we're just too mass market now. We were doing webinars on Zoom before the crisis hit, and now everybody's a follower. It's not that fun anymore. But I'm glad you joined this evening. I'm grateful for that. I hope it was useful to you all, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye. Have a nice evening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.